Welcome to Silent Secrets. I never imagined that one ordinary evening could change the course of my life entirely. What began as a simple dinner and a casual movie night with my stepson slowly unraveled into something I could never have anticipated. There was a subtle restlessness in him that made me uneasy, though I couldn't understand why. And then, almost without warning, I realized that same restlessness mirrored my own feelings. Those quiet, unspoken desires and longings that I had kept buried for years. In one terrifying, silent moment, it became clear. Some boundaries, once crossed, cannot be restored. If this is your first time here, please subscribe and hit the like button. Your support allows us to keep sharing real, heartfelt stories just like this. Now, let me take you into what happened. My name is Eleanor. That summer, the house felt more like a waiting room than a home. George, my husband, was always traveling for work. His calls, the late-night hotel check-ins, the endless stream of excuses, all of it made our marriage feel like a collection of logistics rather than a life we shared. The nights were long, and silence had become our only companion. Then Liam arrived. He wasn't a stranger exactly. Liam was George's son from an earlier marriage. And at 21, he carried that unique blend of restlessness and hope that comes with youth. He had been polite and cautious, yet underneath there was a hunger for life, an eagerness to find his place in the world. He stayed with us for a few weeks as he prepared for college applications and job interviews. At first, our interactions were entirely ordinary. We shared late-night snacks, laughed over old films, and occasionally went on morning jogs. Nothing in those moments hinted at danger or crossed lines, at least, not at first. But that night changed everything. George called to say he would be working late, miles away, in another city. I was on the couch with a glass of wine, mindlessly scrolling through my phone when Liam came down the stairs, his hair still damp from the shower, sweatpants loosely tied at the waist. He sat across from me, quieter than usual, but there was a new intensity in his gaze. "You look lonely," he said softly. I brushed it off, murmuring that I was just tired, but his gaze didn't waver. He had noticed things. The music I played when I thought no one was listening, the novels lined neatly on the shelves, even the subtle hint of perfume I wore that evening. At first it felt harmless, an observant young man being polite, but gradually that attention sharpened into something I couldn't ignore. Then he said the words that should never have been spoken. "I don't think George deserves you." My heart froze. I told him to stop. Part of me wanted to push him away. But another part, a part that had gone hungry for attention for far too long, answered in silence. That night, our conversation stretched on until dawn. It began as casual talk, but slowly transformed into confessions. He spoke of not belonging, of constant comparisons to others, of the pressure he felt to perform and live up to expectations. I spoke of loneliness, of missing the person I once thought I knew, of the quiet emptiness that had filled our marriage. Walls we had built around ourselves crumbled, and for a few fragile hours, we let ourselves feel things we should have hidden. When he reached for my hand, I didn't pull away. When he whispered my name, my resolve wavered. And when our lips brushed, I didn't stop him. Every instinct screamed that it was wrong, yet in that suspended moment, nothing else seemed to matter. Morning returned with its harsh, unrelenting light, bringing the weight of truth. Guilt filled the rooms where warmth had lingered the night before. I tried to distance myself, to convince myself that it had been a single lapse, a fleeting mistake. But Liam's presence made that impossible. Small touches lingered longer than they should have in the kitchen. Notes slipped discreetly into my hand. A glance lasted just a fraction too long. A conversation held an undercurrent of something neither of us dared to name. His hunger frightened me because it reflected my own. "Don't you feel alive with me?" he asked once, almost pleading. And I had to admit I did. Not the steady, quiet love of marriage, but something raw and urgent that made me feel seen again. It wasn't love in the traditional sense. It was a dangerous need, a momentary escape from the emptiness that had grown between George and me. But it was real, and that realization terrified me. Over the coming days, the tension grew. Every interaction was loaded with unspoken emotion. Our conversations were more layered, our silences heavier. The longer we stayed in proximity, the more the old rhythms of our lives seemed to unravel. The house no longer felt like a waiting room. It felt alive, charged with things I didn't want to admit but couldn't ignore. I kept telling myself this was temporary, that it would pass, that I could keep my feelings contained. But every smile, every fleeting touch, every shared laugh chipped away at my resolve. One evening, we found ourselves alone in the study. The world outside had faded into quiet, and the only sound was the low hum of the ceiling fan. He leaned closer than necessary to point something out in the book we were reading together. Our hands brushed, and an electric shock ran through me. It was impossible to pretend that nothing was happening, impossible to ignore the weight of our connection. I shouldn't feel this way, I murmured mostly to myself. I know, he replied softly. I know it's wrong, but sometimes feelings aren't convenient. And that was the truth I couldn't deny. Feelings don't ask for permission. They don't respect boundaries, especially when your heart has been quietly starving for attention for years. The weeks passed, each day more complicated than the last. I found myself anticipating his presence, dreading the moments when he would leave, replaying conversations in my mind. The thrill of attention, of being truly seen again, coexisted with an unbearable guilt that weighed heavily on my conscience. I kept asking myself, how could I betray George, someone I had promised to share my life with? And yet, the pull between us was undeniable. One night, as rain streaked against the windows, we sat together in silence. He looked at me with a vulnerability I couldn't resist. Eleanor, he whispered, do you ever wonder if maybe we're meant to feel more than we should? I swallowed hard, feeling the conflict twist in my chest. I do, I admitted, voice barely audible. But it terrifies me. That fear was the most real thing I had felt in years. It wasn't just about rules or morality. It was about acknowledging a part of myself I had long buried, the part that craved connection, attention, and feeling alive. From that night onward, every interaction became a careful dance of emotions. We laughed. We shared moments that could have been innocent, but the undercurrent of longing always remained. It was a delicate tension, thrilling and terrifying all at once. I became acutely aware of every subtle movement, every glance, every fleeting touch. And Liam. He seemed equally aware, equally caught in the storm of our shared emotions. Yet life continued around us. George remained oblivious, caught in his work and routine. Friends visited, chores had to be done, and the world outside the house demanded normalcy. But inside, a quiet revolution was taking place, a reshaping of desires, priorities, and understanding. It wasn't just about romance, it was about identity, about seeing ourselves reflected in someone else's attention, and realizing that we had lost pieces of who we were along the way. In Liam's eyes, I saw a mirror of my own loneliness, my own needs, and my own suppressed vitality. And in mine, I became a reflection of something he had been searching for but never articulated. Eventually, I understood that secrets, no matter how carefully hidden, never truly stay hidden. Every compromise, every rationalized choice, laid the groundwork for inevitable consequences. Each fleeting touch, each whispered confession, became a thread pulling apart the life I thought was steady and secure. There were moments of doubt so strong they made me question my sanity. Was I selfish? Was I cruel? Could I live with the guilt that came with these stolen emotions? And yet, there was no denying the sense of being alive that Liam awakened in me, something George had inadvertently lost touch with over the years. The most painful part was the knowledge that this connection was unsustainable. We were dancing on a tightrope stretched between desire and consequence, between the need to feel and the obligation to honor promises. Every choice mattered. Every glance held weight. Every silence screamed louder than words. I remember one evening, sitting alone in my bedroom, staring at the ceiling as the dusk settled outside. I replayed the weeks in my mind, the moments of closeness, the silent confessions, the small gestures that had begun innocently, but now carried profound significance. I realized that even if nothing else changed, those memories would remain with me forever. Because once boundaries are crossed, they can never truly be restored. The emotional intimacy we shared, the sense of being understood and valued, had permanently altered the landscape of my heart. And yet, amidst the guilt and fear, there was clarity. I understood that life is not always about making perfect choices. It is about acknowledging the truth of our feelings, accepting the consequences, and learning from the paths we traverse, however perilous they may be. Liam still wanted more. So did I. And in those hours, in that fragile, unspoken space, nothing else seemed to matter. But life, as it always does, moves forward. Decisions must be made. Truths must eventually be faced. The tension between desire and duty remains unresolved, a quiet storm beneath the surface of every ordinary day. When I look back now, I see how each stolen glance, each whispered confession, and every carefully measured interaction was a thread slowly unraveling the tapestry of my assumed stable life. And I know this. One day, the truth may come out. And when it does, I will have to face the consequences of these emotions, these choices, and these unspoken desires. For now, I carry the weight of that summer, of those nights, of that connection that was as dangerous as it was exhilarating. A memory that changed everything, yet can never be taken back. The house may appear normal. Life may seem ordinary. But beneath the surface, everything has shifted. And the secret, our secret, remains, quietly shaping the rest of my life. Thank you for listening. If you found this story compelling, please subscribe, like, and share Silent Secrets. Your support helps bring these real, heartfelt stories to life.